Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My Nuffield report is titled, Does the Broiler Industry Need to Change to Feed an Increasing Population? Firstly, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust for giving me the opportunity to explore and research my chosen subject, to enable doors to be opened which I never thought possible, and to put me outside of my comfort zone on numerous occasions, including today. I'm honoured to be the first ever poultry meat scholar, and I hope I've made my sponsors proud of becoming part of the Nuffield family. My sponsors are the three main global breeder companies, Aviogen, Cobb and Hubbard. Their support and help have been above and beyond anything I could have wished for, and I would particularly like to thank Graham Deere, Johnny Lester, Roy Muttimer, Anthony Taylor and Jim Hunnable. Lastly, but most definitely not least, my family, especially my husband Nick, who was the one who suggested I apply for a scholarship and has been my biggest supporter and guiding light. Thank you. The UN predicts that by 2050, our planet will be home to some 9.5 billion people. Today, the population stands at 7.2 billion, which means that in just 36 years, the planet will have to cope with another 2.3 billion people, which is approximately a third more. The UN also predicts that in 2050, we will need to produce 70% more food than we were in 2010. That is an extremely big ask. Are we capable of this? Chicken is an extremely efficient, healthy, and relatively inexpensive form of protein, which should have a huge role to play in feeding this increasing population. My scholarship has been based around the question of whether the broiler industry could produce the required amount of meat in 2050 using current production methods. When deciding where to travel, I looked at countries deemed to be current leaders in production techniques, as I felt I had more to learn from them. I was looking at the year 2050. Due to very high levels of biosecurity within the broiler industry, it is unusual for growers to visit other farms. So my first visits were within the UK to find out that the way we are rearing broilers at home is the same as the rest of the country. And I'm pleased to say that fundamentally it is. These visits and meetings with industry leaders gave me confidence to travel abroad and discuss how we rear broilers in the UK. My travels included Europe, Australasia and North America, where I was extremely fortunate to meet growers, processors, technologists, geneticists, researchers and industry leaders, all of whom have expanded my thoughts, knowledge and understanding of our amazing broiler industry. I've made a number of conclusions and recommendations within my report, but thought today I would talk about 2 points which have just as much relevance to other agricultural sectors as it does to the broiler industry. With 9.5 billion people alive, where are they all going to live? There is likely to be an increase in the size of existing urban areas, which in the first instance could take up valuable agricultural land, and in the second instance potentially present a situation where the inhabitants do not look favourably upon production of food within close proximity to themselves. This appears to be more prevalent with the broiler industry. Governments will have to review planning regulations and guidelines to ensure that all parties are able to live and work in harmony. In addition to housing, there will be other human requirements for land in the form of infrastructure, roads, railways and airports, communal green areas, recreation areas, along with land for buildings such as hospitals, schools, shops, factories, offices, etc. Everything we deem today to be a necessity rather than a luxury. My assumption is that not everyone will be vegetarian, and therefore we need to find more land for housing animals to provide food for us. Although not in immediate favour of the general public, we may find ourselves in the situation where the majority of animals are kept inside, as this is the most efficient form of land usage. Currently, it is the market which gives us an outlet for free-roaming animals. But if there is a struggle for land, I think we can all guess who will win, and the markets will change. As well as land for housing, we will need land for growing food. Food for immediate human consumption in the form of cereals, fruit, vegetables, etc., and food for animals, which will then be converted into food for human consumption. We need to think about food security and being more self-sufficient in producing our own requirements, not relying on the global market. Recent events in Europe with Russian trade embargoes have shown that countries will look after themselves first and foremost. To reiterate a previous point, governments need to be aware of local planning policies which could have an impact on a country's ability to be self-sufficient and act accordingly. Having said this, we should also be aware that if we're able to produce in excess of requirements, there are countries unable to support themselves and should be offered the opportunity to trade. As you can now gather, we're talking about the need for a lot of land to enable us to live and survive. There is not a tremendous amount of land which has not already been converted into productive usage, and therefore we will have to use the valuable asset wisely and efficiently. The importance of water is undervalued. We have what we have, and currently we are unable to produce any more. In nutritional terms, water is the single most important nutrition that we feed to animals. Yet, in most instances, it is taken completely for granted and therefore often neglected. Water usually receives attention only when a problem occurs. Increasing the population will put extra pressure on the requirement for water, just like land. It is not just the availability of water, but also the quality of it that we need to be aware of. For drinking water, good quality water is more efficient for health, and therefore we should be reviewing the standards of water. Please also do not forget about the extra convenience we've created for ourselves, which use water. Washing machines, dishwashers, showers, and even the flushing toilet. How many times in a day are they used, and by how many? And are they needed, and do they need drinking quality water? In the UK, we can rear standard broilers to 38 kg per square metre, per crop, excuse me, with 7 crops a year, thus producing annually 266 kg per square metre, which equates to 1,076 tonnes per acre. Pretty impressive use for land. In its own right, this sounds incredible, but we must also be aware that to produce this amount, we need a suitable diet to achieve it, which in turn requires land to grow it. The breeder companies are playing their part by selecting the genetics of the broiler to require less feed to produce the required weight. There is a table within my report showing how the breeder company Cobb have reduced the feed conversion rate from 2.22 in 1990 to 1.82 in 2010, with a target of 1.62 in 2020, and I have no doubt that this will be achieved. The reduction in the feed conversion rate, along with increased cereal yields, will help take pressure off the land. In his Templeton report, Nick Major of Full Farmers has calculated that in 2020, an additional 216 million tonnes of feed will be required to meet the projected increase in poultry meat. But if the feed conversion rate could be reduced by 0.5, the feed required would be reduced by 54 million tonnes. Perhaps water is of a greater concern than land. We can become more inventive with land, one example being multi-tiered broiler houses. As previously mentioned, we cannot make any more water. We have what we have. So we need to start thinking about using it more wisely. From a broiler perspective, Susan Watkins from the University of Arkansas has written a report noting that although the broilers are physically drinking more now than previously, this has become more efficient. Whilst in Australia, the lack of water became very apparent. Fields were bone dry. A fellow Nuffield scholar, Jodie Redcliffe, with her husband, were concerned that their supply of water was dwindling, and very soon they would have to start buying in tanker loads of water. In stark contrast, in Alberta, Canada, The Rockies are a source of plentiful water, which through constructed waterways provides a huge reserve available for farmers for central pivot irrigation. Within the broiler industry, the breeder companies are addressing the issue of water consumption and absorption. As growers, we need to be more vigilant with water, daily checking of water lines, ensuring no leakages, and making sure that the quality of the water is correct to aid gut health, which in turn makes feed and water consumption more efficient. An example of a relatively simple change within the last decade is that of moving from bale drinkers to nipple drinkers, which has reduced the wastage of water and added the advantage of aiding the quality of litter, which produces a better environment for the broiler. Having spent an enlightening 18 months visiting and talking to people within the broiler industry, I'm amazed at the advances already happening and have been constantly happening for the last 30 years or more. The broiler industry is an extremely progressive industry with a wealth of knowledge and experience, not afraid to think outside the box and to look at so-called problems in a different light. The industry is acutely aware of what the market requires and produces to this requirement. For example, hot countries such as Indonesia struggle with storage facilities, and therefore the average broiler has grown to 1.8 kg. The UK average is 2.2, enabling the consumer to cook and eat the whole chicken in one day, wasting nothing, which they can ill afford. I have great confidence that the industry will be able to feed an increasing population, just as long as it continues to adapt and change the marketplace, environment, and public perception. The knowledge gained through my studies has given us confidence at home to start the process of planning permission, to increase our site from 83,000 to 300,000 birds per crop. It has also underlined the need for the quality of water to be accurate for gut health, and we installed a system which keeps the acid and chlorine levels at the correct balance throughout the lifetime of the broilers across all the houses. I have always been extremely proud of the broiler industry, but this scholarship has given me further knowledge and respect for how the industry works. It is a truly unique and progressive industry which works together to make a formidable agricultural sector. To conclude, and like with everybody else, we want a quote. I would like to share with you a quote from a very wise, famous British gentleman, Winston Churchill. His words very succinctly describe the broiler industry, which I'm very proud to be part of. But I'm not going to read the quote to you. Instead, I would like you to read it to yourselves, but to put a smile on your faces, I would like you to read it whilst doing your own impersonation of Winston Churchill.